AUKUS, it's a big deal, and China's upset about it. But this is really just the first in a series of kind of rollbacks, almost, if you will, where you've seen countries that are allied with the United States in the Indo-Pacific, or even countries that aren't allied with the United States in the Indo-Pacific, that are sort of taking steps to counter China. And really, China's sort of bringing this on itself unnecessarily. You know, the perfect example is the visiting forces agreement that the Philippines has now put back in place. You know, that was off the charts. That was going away. You know, it looked like, Duterte had said we want to have a closer relationship with China. That wasn't going to happen. Yep. But then China started threatening, Philippine vessels in Philippines EEZ. Yep. So China decided to go back and let
that laser pointer, right?
Yeah, exactly, and let the Americans come back in. Again, it's like you think of China playing the long game. Everybody talks about China playing the long game, and typically they do. Yeah. But they just really are not when it comes to Indo-Pacific strategy.
Indeed. You know, we mentioned up top that there are some concerns about nuclear proliferation. That is basically the center of China's objections or arguments to AUKUS, right? And they may have a point, I don't know. But on the U.S. side, this is nuclear technology which is being transferred, and for the first time to an ally since probably the 50s when that kind of stuff went to the UK, right? How hard is it going to be for the White House to get this through export restrictions, et cetera?
I think not very hard. You know, it's not just nuclear technology, it's also semiconductors. There's all sorts of restrictions that the U.S. has placed now on exports. But the political climate is such in the United States right now that basically you get one or two senators out there who to say that they want to push this forward. Nobody's going to want to vote against it. You know, like this is the thing that the Democrats and the Republicans agree on, being tough on China. Well, that and bailing and, protecting depositors of it.
Well, indeed.
There are two things they agree on now. Yeah. But, the political will is so strong. There's almost a fear of appearing to be soft on China among both the Republicans and the Democrats, so I don't see that being a big...
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, the rolling plan basically is you've got port visits by subs to Australia. Then that's going to turn into sort of rotational deployments, right? Visiting and staying for a longer period of time and patrolling around the waters, et cetera, right? Mm-hmm. Then it's ultimately going to end up at the end of the day when Australia gets its own subs, right? Mm-hmm. British design, but U.S. technology, et cetera. Is Australia going to end up as sort of a U.S. forward base, almost?
I mean, insofar as American vessels will have access to those ports,
and maintenance, et cetera.
And the maintenance, and I think, and you touched on something there when you talk about forward bases. I think that there's an element to this deal that's sort of a little under discussed, which is in the long term, and as you pointed out, it is a long-term deal, and so take that as you will. Yeah. This deal is about sort of reinvigorating Australia's defensive industrial base. And in some ways, I think that's as big a deal as the fact of Australia getting nuclear-powered submarines. A nuclear-powered submarine is a submarine that's more quiet and can stay at sea for longer, basically infinitely. Yeah. It does not mean it's armed with nuclear weapons, and I think that there are a lot of people who hear that word nuclear and they
make that connection when
they make that connection. I even think that the Chinese Foreign Ministry is taking advantage of that confusion when they talk about saying things like, this is a violation of nuclear non-proliferation. Well, no, not really. I mean, Australia doesn't even have its own nuclear power plants. So switching over to enriching uranium and building nuclear weapons
is not.
Yeah, it's not the type of thing you can hide either.
All right. So Australia benefits from this, their defense industrial base, et cetera. The U.S. does as well, does it not? Because the details aren't out yet, but it's going to mean I don't know how many Australians, right, over at U.S. shipyards when shipyards over there are already straining, can't get the labor they need, and the sub-building program in the U.S. is actually kind of behind a little.
Yeah, it is. That's true. They're having some problems in the shipyards in the U.S. But, if you're a shipbuilder, you want some sort of assurance in terms of like the long-term feasibility of investing that capital to make it possible to build those vessels.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that part of the function of this being such a long-term deal is it's indicating a commitment that the U.S. and its allies are going to be, customers in the future.
Yeah, indeed. I was reading an interesting story online at another website saying that, look, while these nuclear attack subs may sound sexy, etc., at the end of the day, going forward, when you take a look at what's been going on in the air for decades already, right, Afghanistan, etc., drone warfare, something similar may be underway and may be the future for undersea warfare as well.
Yeah.
Unmanned, a heck of a lot cheaper, and nowhere near as complicated as nuclear attack subs.
Yeah.
Is this something that AUKUS is looking at, do you think? Even though they say the second stage is probably going to be hypersonic weapons, right?
I think that they have to be.
Yeah.
Because, for example, things like mapping the seafloor, which submarines need. They need good maps. That's done more safely with drone submarines. Now, does that mean that crewed submarines are going to go away anytime soon? I don't really think so. I think that submarines are the safe military bet. You know, if Australia had said that it wanted to build a nuclear carrier task force, then I would say, I don't know that that's really the direction you want to go. I don't know how long the future is for those.
Yeah.
But I think that drones have got to factor in, probably along with, these crewed nuclear submarines.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, the South China Sea, the seabed, it's probably one of the most treacherous places on Earth.
It is.
For subs, right?
It
so
is.
the more information they can have, probably the better.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Listen, Ted, what else is trending on CNBC.com right now?
Yeah, so today, markets, unsurprisingly, U.S. markets making that rebound. I think everybody went to bed in Asia last night wondering what would happen with U.S. markets today. And Dow came back 300 points, snapped a losing streak. Of course, that has a lot to do with the banks and the big bounce back that the regional banks had in the U.S. yesterday. Also, one of the top stories, though, is Moody's, downgrading its outlook for U.S. banks. I'm almost of a mind that they might have jumped the gun on that. At least, well, forget what I think. That's what apparently equity investors think, because the money went back into the regional banks overnight. Yeah. And then a story that is somewhat related to the one that we're talking about, which is that apparently a Russian fighter jet collided with a U.S.-operated drone over the Black Sea. Yeah. Both sides, as you might expect, giving completely different versions about what happened there, but we know for sure that the drone did go into the water. Yeah. And this, I guess, points to those tensions always being there, gives Vladimir Putin something to talk about when he meets with Xi coming up, pretty soon.
That could happen sooner than expected as well, right?
In fact, it could. And if I'm Vladimir Putin and I go into that meeting, my line of conversation is going to be, hey, look, this isn't just about us. This is about you guys, too. You need to get on board with us.